Chris, stay with us. That's extraordinary bit of information coming out of Washington now. Let me add to something that we said earlier. We have a report now that a large plane crashed this morning north of the Somerset County Airport, which is in western Pennsylvania, not too terribly far from Pittsburgh, about 80 miles or so. Boeing 767 jet. Don't know whose airline it was, whose airplane it was, and we don't have any details beyond that which I have just given you. We don't know if this is somehow connected to what has gone on in New York and Washington, but we do know that another plane has crashed, this one about 80 miles south of Pittsburgh, or at least to the southeast of Pittsburgh. Rose Arce, one of our producers here in New York, joins us on the phone. Rose, what do you have that's new?
Yes, just a while ago, I think you saw that collapse of the top of the World Trade Center. Well, it looks like a large chunk of that debris has hit a building very close by, about 2 blocks away next to an elementary school, causing another explosion. So for the last few minutes, I've been watching people running from that direction. There was one man, I'm not child, but you saw on the street. I've seen several emergency service workers carrying other emergency service workers from the scene. There's a haze everywhere. It's very, very difficult to see, but there has been the whole area has been covered by soot and ash, so it looks almost like snow. So as people are coming up the street running from the scene of this new explosion, you can see them slipping on the ash and literally having to drag each other up the street. There's an incredible amount of panic down here in downtown Manhattan as people are realizing that they really need to leave the area entirely after spending the last hour or so just watching this from afar.
Rose, stay with us. Terrific work. Let me throw another couple of pieces of information out as we continue to put this all together into a straight line if we can. The United Nations has been evacuated. The United Nations building on the east side of Manhattan has been evacuated. The city is in, this is election day, a primary election for mayor and city council races here in New York. That election has been postponed until further notice. Obviously, we are in the middle of an extraordinary catastrophe that started about 8:45 Eastern Time here in New York when one plane crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. About a half an hour after that, as people were converging, as fire and police and rescue teams were converging on the scene, a second plane appeared to the west of the Trade Center buildings and slammed into the second tower. That's what you just saw. Fire shooting out the north and east side of the tower. Shortly after that, we began to get reports of events taking place in Washington. An explosion which first came to us as a fire at the Pentagon. Now there's a report of a second hijacked plane heading towards the Pentagon. It is believed that one of the planes, perhaps both, but one of them we have been told was an American Airlines 767 that hit one of the Trade Center towers. About a half an hour after that, perhaps a little bit longer, lose track of time a little bit in these situations, the first tower, or let me correct that, the south tower, the second tower, the one to the left, collapsed. It collapsed in a cascade of smoke and spark, and what we cannot tell you is if there was a second explosion that caused that collapse or if it was simply, that's the first one, that's the south tower collapsing, and that was about a half hour, give or take, after the planes hit the tower. Then shortly after that, just as the smoke was starting to clear away, the second tower, and that's what you're looking at now. Again, this was not very long ago, 10, 15 minutes ago. The second tower, it almost looks like one of those implosions of buildings that you see, except there is nothing controlled about this. This is devastation. How many people? There are 50,000 people who normally go to work in the Trade Center buildings. How many of those people had arrived already? How many of those people were trapped on the upper stories? How many of those people have been hurt? How many of those people died? We cannot tell you now. We can tell you that hospitals throughout the New York area are receiving literally hundreds of patients. And they are performing triage. They are trying to figure out who could be treated, who needs help first. This is sort of standard operating procedure. We are just being told now that Israel has evacuated all its diplomatic missions around the world. Israel has evacuated its missions. We are told now that Yasser Arafat has condemned these attacks, and we don't know yet who's behind them. Britain has condemned these attacks. Germany has convened its National Security Council, and we will check and see if events are going on in those places or if that is simply a reaction to what has gone on here in Washington and in New York. CNN's Gene Meserve joins us on the phone from Washington. Gene.
Hay Street, which is one of the major thoroughfares here in Washington, it is absolute gridlock. It takes about 15 minutes to drive one block. Ordinarily, this time of day, there'd be nothing near this kind of traffic. You see pedestrians filling the sidewalks, many of the businesses and offices here having closed. You see cars absolutely pouring out of the parking lots, contributing to the absolutely horrendous traffic situation. Many people trying to use their cell phones. However, cell phone service has become very difficult in this town because of the crush on circuits. For the most part, people appear to be very calm and collected. I will tell you, though, that as I drove, I looked at the car next to me full of some young women who I would guess were in their 20s, several of them crying their eyes out, obviously very upset as they listened to the radio and heard the news of what is happening in this city in New York also. Aaron, back to you.
Gene, thanks. Gene Meserve in Washington this morning as she and the rest of the organization continues to gather what facts we can, what facts are available in the wake of the extraordinary chaos that has followed this extraordinarily horrendous terrorist attack. American Airlines, we are told, one of the planes involved in this was a hijacked American Airlines 767 out of Logan Airport in Boston. American Airlines will say what is known. What is known as you look at the White House being evacuated a short time ago, or is that live? And I'm not sure on my monitor which it is. I believe it's taped from a short time ago. In any case, American Airlines will talk to reporters in about a half hour or so, 11:30 Eastern Time. One of its planes involved in this, and we will bring that press conference to you live when it happens. Here in New York, hospitals are being overwhelmed. As hundreds of patients are being brought in and being treated. We cannot tell you, we would not even begin to guess what the numbers in this will be, how many people will have died by the time this day is over, how many injuries have taken place in both Washington and New York. But as former police commissioner Howard Safer told us a few moments ago, obviously the numbers are going to be extraordinary. Who do we have on the phone, guys? Just help me out here. Patty, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
What do you got?
About an hour ago, I was on the corner of Broadway and Park Place. That's about 1,000 yards from the World Trade Center. When the first tower collapsed, it was a massive explosion. At the time, the police were trying desperately to evacuate people from the area. When that explosion occurred, it was like the scene out of a horror film. People started stampeding away from it.
Patty, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. We told you there was a second plane that went down, this one around 80 miles or so southeast of Pittsburgh. We'll try now to connect with KDKA TV in Pittsburgh. Well, just so much for planning. We will try again. We have reports that a plane has crashed in the Pittsburgh area, southeast of Pittsburgh, about 80 miles. And at varying times, we've heard that this was a 767 and a 747. I'm not sure it matters which it is. What matters is that a plane has crashed in the Pittsburgh area. The Pentagon continues to monitor reports that another plane, a hijacked plane, is headed for that area. All flights have been canceled around the country. International flights heading towards the United States are being diverted into Canada this morning. Patty, let me go back to you. as we look at some tape from the ground. Patty, why don't you go ahead and continue?
Okay, Aaron, I'm in the main building of Pace University, which is inside the fallout zone of all the debris from the two building collapses. At the time of the first building collapse, I was at Broadway and Park Place. There was a huge cloud of smoke. It overcame the crowd. People were stampeding. Literally, the debris was so thick you could not see your hand in front of your face. I ducked around onto a building that was on Park Place and Beekman Street. When I was in there, people were coming in. They were crying. They were wailing. You couldn't see anything outside. After the smoke had cleared a little bit, I came outside. The scene was like a ghost town in the financial district, very eerie. You saw people being wheeled on gurneys away from the site of the explosion.